Congratulations to everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Marilyn to introduce Derek while I give Judy co-host privileges. And welcome to the meeting. Take it away, Marilyn.
Okay, well, thank you. So Derek, once again, where are you? I don't see Derek. Where is he? Maybe I have to put it on the full gallery view, maybe.
I'm here. I'm hiding.
Oh, there you are. Okay, you're hiding.
In the cyberspace
corner. I feel better when I can see your face somehow in this crazy world. So anyway, Derek, welcome. We're really pleased you're here. We have many members who are interested in journalism and in nonfiction writing in particular. So what better opportunity than to hear from a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist like you. A conversation about the revolution and how Americans get their news, what this means for the future of our democracy, and challenges reporting factual information in an era of hyper-partisanship and claims the news is rigged. I'm sure none of us recognize any of those circumstances. I want to give just a short profile of your background. Derek is a Napa-based freelance writer who, along with the staff of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and that's of course in Sonoma County, was awarded a Pulitzer Prize for breaking news coverage of Northern California wildfires in 2017. As a daily news reporter, Derek covered numerous national and international events, including the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, the 9/11 terror attacks, and the 2014 South Napa earthquake. Derek has written extensively about local government, state politics, the environment, and health, the latter with a particular emphasis on adolescent mental health. He has a journalism degree from Sacramento State University, and as a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholar lived in South Africa, where he earned a postgraduate diploma in African Studies from the University of Cape Town. Derek is president of the Pacific Media Workers Guild, which represents hundreds of journalists on the West Coast and in Hawaii. He and his wife, December, have 2 children and a cat. So welcome again, Derek. It's all yours.
Well, thank you. And speaking of the cat, if you hear her, she's pretty noisy, especially in the middle of the night. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I do regret it's in this format. It's strange that this technology that's supposed to bring us together feels strangely claustrophobic when we cram everybody onto a screen. I would much prefer to be there in person. I'm sure you would as well. And thank you. It's a beautiful day, as Sean mentioned, and probably a fair number of you would rather be anywhere but staring at my face on this screen. So thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry that Chrissy couldn't make it. Certainly understand the circumstances, but I have to say working with Chrissy at the Press Democrat was a pure joy. She was a lovely person in a room full of vipers and sharks. I always went to her desk and talked with her just to get a sense of humanity. And I very much enjoyed working alongside her. So I wish all the best to Christy, and Sean, please pass that along to her, given the circumstances. On the opposite end of the spectrum, this is Kimberly Ingalls' 3rd time listening to me. I think that is a sign of a problem. So I don't know, Kimberly, you're not on my screen, so that's probably good because I can't see you making faces at me. But I think probably you need to not keep tuning into me because I think that's a cry for help. So I'm only kidding. I love Kimberly. I saw her down in Monterey. I saw her in Napa, and I'm now with her. So Kimberly's been a real advocate of mine and really is the reason that I'm here today, because she passed along that maybe I had something that was of interest to you guys. And so thanks, Kimberly, for that. It's a little intimidating actually to be with a group of writers such as yourself because you are actually writers. I'm a hack. I'm a journalism hack, and I'm proud to say that. Staring at a blank page fills me with a sense of dread, and that's only when I have to write, 400 words. The idea of writing a book or something of any length. I mentioned earlier that I picked up the bartender's book at my neighbor's garage sale. It's because it drives me to to drink and other bad vices. So I applaud you for what you do, because it's really intimidating to me. I don't know if you had a chance, and if you didn't, it's fine. But I submitted what I call Derek's Dozens, which is my 12 little tips for writing news stories. And number 11 is actually the one that I struggle with the most. It's basically perfectionism. I like to say that I am a perfectionist in recovery. And it's something that I've actually spent a fair amount of time talking to my therapist about. He asked me one time, what would be the problem if you got something wrong? And I said, well, probably my job, but so what, right? Or I convict the innocent. That could be bad. So it's kept me up at night more than once. You can't be a perfectionist on deadline when you're a journalist, for sure. And so I've had to work through that, and it's funny when it's not. And I'll give you just a quick anecdote. Several years ago, I was on the night shift at the Press Democrat, and it was 2 days before Christmas, so Christmas Eve. I had already filed 2 front page stories for the paper. One was a story about a guy who claimed to have caught the world's biggest bass fish out of Spring Lake. And this was a big deal because the holy grail of bass fish world is to catch the biggest bass. Like you get $1 million right off the bat. Well, the story basically, this was a whopper of a tale. And so I was able to deconstruct it and out him as a fraud. The other one was a really horrible story about a young man in Healdsburg who was tortured and killed over a drug deal gone wrong. That had already occurred by the time that I started my cop checks for the night. We have to call every law enforcement agency in 3 counties, actually, Mendocino, Lake, and Sonoma. And I was almost finished when I got a tip that there was something significant that had happened up in Ukiah. And the something significant was that a Reach medical helicopter tragically crashed in heavy fog, and it killed everybody on board. So I had 10 minutes to write that story before we went to press. And I just started writing. And my editor, who sat right behind me, at one point, he's counting down, the minutes, the seconds. And then he finally just said, Derek, you're just going to have to give me that story. So is it any wonder why I'm as disturbed as I am? No. Or why any journalist on deadline is disturbed? You cannot be a perfectionist on deadline. And I've learned that actually the best stories that I tend to write are the ones where I get out of my own way. I just try to quiet that mind and just let it ride. So I don't know if some of you have the same experience where you find that you get into some sort of rhythm and flow, and then it just you kind of vomit it up. And that's what works for me. But the idea of doing anything longer than a news story, it's probably not going to happen for me. So yeah, on that upside, this is a very happy topic, right? We'll roll right into what the theme of my speech, which is really joyful, which is basically the end of democracy in life as we know it, the free press and all the rest. Right now, if you want to tune out, that's fine. Go find a beach somewhere. I would just ask though, and this is something that I ask of, every group. I can see a lot of hands, but by a show of hands, how many of you still actually subscribe to a paper delivered to you made from a dead tree? Yeah, just a handful. Okay. Well, that question usually falls along generational lines. Actually, I'm surprised that there's not more hands up, but it's usually when I ask that question of a certain age group or demographic, there's quite a few hands. And then I go to a different demographic, which could be like, the college crowd, and nobody raises their hand. Nobody's getting a paper delivered on their driveway. I'm the only person on my block that does. I actually get 3 of them, which is kind of bizarre, but that's the generation that I'm from. I grew up in Oklahoma, and the Daily Oklahoman landed with a thud on our driveway every morning. and I fell in love with just thumbing through the pages of the newspaper. And that's really what inspired me to become a journalist. I can't imagine not getting a physical copy of the paper, even though I do embrace and subscribe to a lot of publications also online, exclusively. So it's not that I'm um, one or the other. Newspapers made a really, really bad calculation early on in the online, the advent of the internet and online era. I know at the Press Democrat and probably every newsroom, we looked at this thing called the internet and thought, well, that's not going to go anywhere. Who's ever going to do that? And then when they started to bring in the online producers, and Chrissy was, part of this crowd, we looked askance at them, some of us hard-bitten journalist types, like this is not, real reporting and real journalism. And so there was this sort of divide in the newsroom. And of course, we were all just completely wrong. We were slow to embrace it. And the newspapers made a huge, in some cases, fatal miscalculation. They didn't charge for the content that they then did put up onto their news sites. They decided, well, they would just give it away for free. And as a business model, and I will tell you, I'm not a business person, but it'd be like Starbucks giving away coffee for free. Well, it doesn't really sustain, it's not sustaining. And newspapers have been trying to catch up ever since. They've been trying to find that right balance of charging for content, which charging for, it's expensive. Reporting the news is an expensive proposition. How to do that without alienating their audience, who has come to expect that it should be, quote unquote, free. National papers do much better at this. The New York Times, their digital subscriptions are going through the roof, but it's been a chore. When Craigslist came on the scene and started offering free classified ads for puppies and all the rest and all those things that we used to, pay to put in the physical newspaper, it took away about 50% of the ad revenue and classified ad revenue for every newspaper in this country. So these are some of the context by which the news industry has struggled to basically keep the lights on. Then you throw in a pandemic, as we are in now, and a lot of businesses are shuttering. The economy is on shaky ground, and it's become even worse. There's an accelerated decline of newspapers across this country, and it's not good for us. It's not good for democracy. It's not good for our understanding of how this world happens, certainly not from a political standpoint. It's terrible. So I'll come back to that in a second. I don't want to suggest to you that it's all gloom and doom in that regard. There is a beauty with the speed with which we get information. The one example that I always like to use is, remember when the airplane crashed in the Hudson? I think we saw Twitter images of people standing on the wings of that plane within probably 30 seconds of them actually being out on there. People pulled out their phones and started tweeting out images. To me, that still is amazing. The technology still, it's just stunning to me. The earthquake, the fire, or the earthquake in 2014, which I covered, I live in Napa, my wife, my family, we lived through it. It was 21 terrifying seconds that happened at 3:20 in the morning. We raced across the hall, we grabbed our kids. I had to push open the door because my son's dresser drawers had fallen over. And so I literally, we carried them out the door. And the next thing I know, well, I tweeted right as I got out that there's an earthquake in Napa, and I'm told that I beat the federal government's official tweet bot. I was ahead of the government on that one. A few minutes later, my friend Cecilia Vega, who used to be a colleague of mine at the Press Democrat and is now White House correspondent for ABC News, and also a co-host on Good Morning America, she sent me a text because she saw it. She saw my tweet. And she said, I want to check to see if you're okay. And I said I was. And then she texted back, and this is why journalists, we always know what journalists are about. She's like, well, do you think you can give an interview to Good Morning America in about 5 minutes? So she first wanted to make sure that my limbs were intact. And then it was all business. So I gave an interview to Good Morning America, standing in the living room of our very damaged home. I wrapped that up, and 30 minutes later, I had grabbed all my stuff. I left my family on the driveway because that's what good dads do. And then I raced off to a mobile home park just north of town that was on fire. I was the first reporter on scene, and I'm there hunkering down behind firefighters like an umpire at a baseball game, taking video and tweeting out images of them battling the blaze and the poor, stunned folks who live there gathering in the community building, no lights, and everybody just in a complete state of shock. So it is remarkable to me. I've lived through this revolution in the technology. You know, it used to be that we had to go find a payphone. There was an airplane crash with some folks from Sonoma County who were very well known. The plane crashed in Fresno, and I was dispatched down there, and I drove and got down there, and I'm in the field, the debris field from the crash, took my notes, you know, did my interviews, and then had to go find a payphone and call in the story. And somebody on the desk had to write it, you know, my notes up and then put it into the paper. There's something to be said about having information so quickly into consumers' hands instead of you know, being filtered by the gatekeepers. Of course, I grew up with, you know, the big three news networks, also PBS NewsHour. You know, you always tuned in at the end of the day, and then you found out what had happened that day or the night before. So I like that and I miss that, but there's also something to be said for the immediacy of what we do. When I covered Oklahoma City, you know, I was on a plane and landed and then wrote my stories over the next week, and I had to find a fax machine to send them in. You know, now I would have been, you know, live streaming, live tweeting, live Facebooking, everything in real time. And I think that there's value in that. You can also get so fast that you get out front of the facts. And I know you all probably know examples of where stuff gets out too fast, and it's at a cost sometimes of accuracy, and things can go too quickly. I think too, also, you know, not just from a journalism standpoint, but the way the world moves now, social media movements, it can be good and bad with the technology that we have. Certainly social media around the Black Lives Matters movements. This year's been a national reckoning of economic equality and racial injustice. Everything around that, movements have been inspired, people have learned and built communities around the technologies that we have. And I would arguably say that that is a wonderful thing. We've seen them work in the opposite direction too. I think one recent example is on Facebook, the militia group that took to the private Facebook group to plan and plot out their plot to kidnap the you know, Michigan's governor. You know, people use these technologies for also very bad, evil purposes, and this is the environment in which we find ourselves. More broadly, it's really come at a cost to some significant degree, you know, for even what we consider to be the truth or a fact. We now argue over basic, you know, factual truth. People challenge the most basic and fundamental information, and they've come to weaponize information in a way that, you know, we have never experienced, I don't think, in our lifetime. The problem for me and what I struggle with is that I can see the value of a good local news operation. And I would cite the Press Democrat as a shining example of this. I know maybe some of you have your feelings about the Press Democrat and its coverage. Maybe it trends in a way that you think has got a certain bias, that it overcovers certain issues or undercovers others. And those are all very valid and, you know, assessments. It's something that newspapers, you know, everywhere have always, you know, over time had to deal with. But I would submit to you that the Press Democrat is a good paper, and in that in places where that does not exist, what we've seen is a loss of community. people are not connected. They don't know what's happening. They don't know why that project is going up or proposed near their home. They don't know why taxes are being raised. There's actually an interesting study on this front that in places where local news operations have shut down, local taxes have risen, and the degree of local corruption among local government has gone up, because there's just not that local watchdog, those checks and balances. What's happening in the industry is that across the country, it's what we call news deserts, where you can look on a map and see across the country an expanding network where there is now not a local newspaper or other local news operation in communities. Almost a third of US counties and growing now don't have that. And I would submit to you that that's not good for any of us and for our democracy. I always enjoyed, picking up the paper and discovering things I didn't know. That was the beauty of having a paper. You look at one page and then turn the next and you'd be like, what? I didn't know that this was happening. It was just a sense of discovery about things that you didn't know. Now, so many of us operate and live in silos. We're siloed with our information. We filter our news. We only tune into certain websites. We get breaking news alerts from the places that we only care about. And in a lot of cases, what it does is just reinforce the things that we probably already know or suspect to be true. And there's a term for that. It's called confirmation bias. People, read a fact and it only confirms what they think they know. It doesn't matter if the fact is true or not. It's that it resonates with them as being true. And so then it's not about actual truth. It's just about them feeling confident that they know what they think they know. Just today, I read a fascinating piece in the New York Times about something called they call it the Transition Integrity Project. And this is a group of thinkers, including journalists, pollsters, academics. And a little while ago, they got together and they did a thought experiment, basically, where what happens on November 3rd if this becomes a contested election and we are in a situation where the actual election results are under challenge. And they divided themselves into two camps, Team Biden and Team Trump. Well, the Team Biden camp posited that, what if a group of Democrats, Biden wins the popular vote, but not the Electoral College. And then a group of Democrats get together and they propose California and the Pacific Northwest seceding from the United States of America to, unless Senate Republicans agree to increase the number of, representatives in that body. It sounds outlandish, right? I mean, this is just sort of what these thought experiments are designed to do, is to get you to thinking. Well, the certain media or certain folks on a different side of this equation picked this up as an actual thing and started to put it out on social media that Democrats in this country are plotting a coup. They turned and used this to say that Democrats were going to actually propose seceding from the Union should this happen. It started to bounce around the far right media circles, and no less than the president of the United States eventually tweeted out and retweeted from one of these organizations that operate kind of on the far right of the political spectrum, that this was an actual thing. That's what happens. Things like this that, would normally stay maybe in, around an academic, table at a university or, around the coffee table or whatever it is, suddenly can get picked up and then twisted and used and become actual things. And it's my fervent hope I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but as you talk about how do we combat this, I think we need to teach our kids in high school and middle school media literacy, and how to get to the bottom of how this happens. What's the source of your information? Is it true? And I actually did a story about a school in Petaluma, Casa Grande High School, where the high school teacher was doing a course in this. And it was fascinating because he gave the class a fact and said, you got to go find the original source of that fact, or is it a fact? And it sounded so outlandish that I thought it was probably not true. It turned out to be true, but they tracked it down. So as a way of combating, misinformation, I think we have to start much earlier in to talking about how this happens. Somebody said that I was using the wrong term for succeed from the not secession. I don't know. I'm sorry for that. See, this is why I get intimidated talking to real writers, because then you guys actually know how to pronounce words and spell stuff. So my apologies for that. I hope you know what I mean by that. They wanted to go away from the union. So, okay. Thank you. Close to home, I have a close to home example of this and how this works. So when we went on lockdown in California, or the stay-at-home orders, I thought it would be a nice thing to do to send a text to some of my relatives back in Oklahoma and Texas, just to let them know what had happened. And, maybe they should just be aware that this might be headed their way and start planning now. And my stepbrother, with whom I've never had any ill words with ever, promptly wrote back to tell me basically that I was full of it, that they don't quote unquote believe what we believe out here in Northern California. And he defriended me off Facebook and basically shut me out of his life. About 3 weeks ago, my dad let me know that my stepbrother came down with COVID-19. He thinks at church, because they were all unmasked, and because they think this to be a hoax, he ended up in the ICU of a hospital there in Oklahoma City and being treated. Thankfully, I think he's fine, even though he's got a lot of comorbidity, you know what I'm saying? He's got a lot of underlying conditions that could make this go south really bad, and was treated basically with the same protocol as the president. So the idea that he didn't believe what I believe when we're talking about basically a virus that doesn't care what you believe is, I think, a testament to the times in which we live. If we have to argue about whether COVID-19 represents, potential threat to your health, then I would submit to you that it's a sign of the times. I also would just like to say, going back to the idea of solutions and potential solutions, media literacy being one of them. We have to save local journalism. We have to do what we can to buttress that fundamental idea of getting news in the hands of people on a granular level, and not just, the New York Times. We need to know what's happening across town. People need a way to connect. And again, I would say the Press Democrat is a really good example of that. There are efforts afoot to potentially encourage our lawmakers to pass legislation that would create some sort of funding stream for journalism and news operations in this country, sort of along the lines of like the BBC or NPR. There's a bill pending in Congress right now that's supported by the union that I represent, that would argue just that. It's very controversial actually among journalists, because we're still, it comes at a potential cost to people looking at us potentially askance. Can they trust us? Do we have a bias? We don't normally advocate in this way. But as somebody said, it's really hard to just stand by and be objective in some circumstances over your own demise. Where does that get anybody? You can also try and get new ownership. And that was our experience at the Press Democrat. You know, in 2012, this was after the New York Times sold the Press Democrat to this group out of Florida, this group of alligator wrestlers, as I like to call them, out of Florida, and we got a hold of their business model. That some of us on the union side, and they wanted to come in and cut 50% of the operation before they ever came through the door. And so I and a couple of the unit officers, the union officers there, we got together and we hatched a plan, probably over a few drinks, that basically boiled down to, let's go find some rich people to buy the Press Democrat. And this is all a matter of public record. I called a guy named Doug Bosco, a former U.S. congressman that I, had some dealings with on the news side. And I just said, Doug, got anybody that would like to buy the Press Democrat? And he said, well, as a matter of fact, I do. It's a guy named Darius Anderson. And I never heard Darius' name in my life. And turns out they were making a play for the Press Democrat. Very long story short, we on the union side just told them, we support anybody who supports local journalism. We were in contentious contract negotiations with the new ownership group. We just all sort of laid down our swords and let the process play out. And in 2012, Sonoma Media Investments was successful in gaining hold of the Press Democrat. And it came at, quite a bit of pain for our membership, including, I believe, Chrissy. I believe Chrissy was there with us at the time. We froze our pensions voluntarily. We took, significant pay cuts. I was about 2 weeks from getting my 5th week of vacation. 2 weeks from getting my 5th week of vacation. I'd be where Sean is right now in Aloha. He's on the beach. I see right now in Hawaii. And I voted not to do that. I don't even know what I was thinking. But we voted unanimously to take these concessions because we were told this is what would help the new ownership group. And I think we did a real solid for the community. And I believe that the Press Democrat is doing remarkably well under the circumstances. It's not that case. It's not the case at all in a lot of places. My union represents the Bay Area, Sacramento, Fresno, Modesto, Hawaii, and outside that pocket of Sonoma County, it is it's pretty much a bloodbath. I could go on and on about the cutbacks, the job losses, the furloughs, and that's before the pandemic. A lot of news operations are headed over the cliff or already shut down. And so we are fighting as best we can. Unionism, wherever you stand on unionism, remarkably, we are experiencing a union wave in newsrooms across the country. Just yesterday, Dallas Morning News stunningly became the first unionized newsroom ever in the state of Texas. I find that amazing. State of Texas is a pretty big place. They voted overwhelmingly the newsroom staff there to be represented by a union. Fort Worth, just outside of Dallas, went public with a similar effort, and we're seeing this in newsrooms across the country. Will it save newspapers? Who knows? But I think it's just part and parcel of people thinking that if they stick together, that they can advocate better collectively than they can on their own. Those are just some of my ideas. I know that I've thrown a lot at you. I really appreciate you tuning in. Again, it's kind of hard in this format to have a conversation like this, but I want to stop there. And if anybody, I'll stop there and if the host would like to open it up to questions. Maybe I've gone on so long that now you all are ready just to go to the beach. So, but I do appreciate you listening to me talk.
Well, thank you very much, Derek. That was really, really interesting. If anybody has a question, would you wave your hand or speak up? Judy?
Yeah, Derek, because people don't always check the facts or what the sources are, the public, how else can we help educate people that they need to verify where they're getting their news, and that maybe they need to look at more than one source at a time to see what's happening. I mean, part of what's coming up for me right now is I'm watching another version of the Richard Jewell story, and the whole time I'm sitting there wanting to throw things at the television, because I'm thinking, how could this misinformation have just proliferated everywhere? And so I just want to let you answer that. What can we do to help other people understand they need to pay attention to where the source of the information is coming from?
Well, it's a really good question, and also a really good example you just gave with the Richard Jewell story. That is an example of exactly what we're talking about. I would say that what needs to happen is different from what is going to happen. But what needs to happen is everybody needs to be omnivores when it comes to their media consumption. They need to not just stick to one or two, sources of information. They need to be sort of sampling from the buffet of information that's out there, and be willing to be wrong and to think. My own experience personally, unfortunately, is that is not always what's happening. I know, on my Facebook feed, in my social media ecosystem, telling somebody that they need to do that is interpreted by so many to be that I'm telling them that they're dumb, or that they're wrong, or that I'm trying to make a statement about something. And I don't know if you've had that experience yourself, but I get a little, well, it makes me sad. You just can't have a conversation about these types of things. It really, for me, it comes back to that we have to fundamentally change the way we view the way information is disseminated. And I believe it does start at an earlier age in our schools. But I do think there's also now a reckoning that's happening with Facebook and Twitter and some of our social media platforms. This New York Times story that I referenced earlier about the Integrity Project, the heading was something along the lines of, do we need to rethink the First Amendment? And this is being printed in the New York Times. It's not that the First Amendment needs to go away. It's that it's just so simplistic. Not simplistic. It's an ideal that we all aspire to: the free press, the free flow of ideas. Now people use that in a way to where they use it where the facts don't matter, but to use it in a weaponized way. Do we need to fundamentally, start thinking about what speech do we protect, and where do those limits go? And that's a very broad subject, but can somebody just go and plot a coup, or not a coup, but like a kidnapping the governor, for instance? Like, does Facebook bear some responsibility for hosting? And I would say, and I'll wrap this up on this point, but for me, in the newsroom, we never wanted to get it wrong. We sweated every detail. I can't tell you how many times I've woken up middle of the night worried that I've misspelled somebody's name, and then stayed up the rest of the night for somebody's name. Now people have no compunction about taking any fact and running with it, and then it just takes the rest of us to catch up. So we broadly, I think, have to really, really think about who we are enabling, and in what way information and how it's disseminated. And it might be places that you think that you support are benign, like Facebook. What responsibility do these platforms bear for what they're putting out there? It's a very long-winded answer and a very broad answer, but I think there's just no one answer to that question.
Derek, Bob Lane. I just heard a lecture from Lowell Bergman at UC Berkeley, who's one of the top investigative reporters in the country. You probably know about him, and he's associated with the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. He gave a lecture to the Emeriti Association at Cal, which I'm a member, and he started by saying, I'm going to ask you a question, and most of you probably can't answer it. Who owns the internet? So how many of the other 46 people listening to this know or could tell us today who owns the internet?
I don't know.
I'm not going to hazard a guess. It feels like a trick question, but I'm.
Yeah.
Good question.
And go ahead and
And I
tell
got
us.
it wrong. I didn't know the answer either. Turns out you do, and every one of you own it. The
Okay.
public owns the internet, period.
Well, those of
Most
you,
people don't, according to him, not to me,
yeah.
most people don't know that they own the internet. And he said because of the crisis we're having in this country with factual information, that he posits that what's really needed is a private public commission to regulate the internet, to establish some standards, including academics.
Hmm.
And he pointed out that right now it's only mildly regulated at best.
Well, I think
And he
that's
also-
coming.
Yeah.
I think that's
Right.
coming. We've just, the congressional Democrats just released their report with regard to Facebook and Twitter et al., where they basically stated that these platforms have abused their antitrust authority. And I think it's laying the groundwork for some sort of regulatory, control for these institutions that have been given up to now a wide berth. I see Kimberly has her hand up, but just
Kimberly,
a real quick anecdote on that. In the, back when, in the earlier days of the internet, some of us in the Press Democrat newsroom were absolutely appalled by what was being the comments on some of the stories on the Press Democrat website platform. And we brought this to management's attention, and we were told that legally we needed to be more hands off, not more hands on, because if you were more hands on online, you accepted more liability for that content and speech. So it was different for the newspaper. We have libel laws, all the rest, on that side of it. But back then it was more of a hands off, free exchange, because of this idea that I think is a good idea, that we do own the internet. And when it first came on board, we all thought this was going to be a very humanizing, connecting way for us. And now here we are. I do believe that we are now in a time of reckoning over that, and that it's going to take regulatory oversight probably to bring some of that to heal. Otherwise,
yeah,
we're going to be continuing to have this conversation over and over again.
So Kimberly had a question for you. She's raised her hand.
Yeah, so Derek, I think you may remember my position on the whole, internet, or the newspapers now trying to bring in revenue for their stories and things. We had that discussion. But one of the things that concerns me about social media right now is the censorship that I see happening. Facebook, Twitter, everybody all of a sudden has decided that they need to start, the independent fact checking. And that would be great if I had more confidence in what sources they use for this independent fact checking, et cetera. To me, it still comes down to its censorship. Things are getting booted that people have to say. I don't believe that social media should have that kind of power. I think, but what do you think on that?
Well, I guess I would ask a sort of rhetorical related question. Do you think the Press Democrat, for instance, has a responsibility to vet truth, not slander, live by libel laws? And if so, how is that different from Twitter, Facebook, et cetera?
Well, okay, you said rhetorical, so I'm not.
Well, it wasn't. Oh, see, gosh, you writers. Can we just concede that you guys are smarter than me and it just,
I believe
okay.
I believe that journalism does have a responsibility. I do not believe that social media does, because it is a platform, for them to come along this late in the game and say, you cannot say this. I understand that we all sign up with and check that little box that says you agree to our terms, and those terms are subject to change at any point. I get that. But for them, I have lots of different people on my feed. I've got, the people on this side, the people on that side, and more middle of the road people. which one of us is right, which one of us is wrong. Clearly, there are times when you see something and you go, that's just flat out false, or, fake news, whatever. But, it's going into where posts are being deleted from Twitter, from whatever, that just because, that entity decides, well, we don't want that on here. To me, that's
Well,
censorship.
so
that's
yeah, I mean, I would, I mean, my bias here is that I think we need to establish a stronger framework actually over these platforms, that to where facts are vetted and where information is not just put out. I don't think we can live in an environment where people can just feel that they can put up anything and get away with it. I use the example of my stepbrother, Chad. He lives on a steady diet of QAnon, Channel 4, and whatever, to where he thought it's a hoax. COVID-19 is a hoax. Now, people can have that, I guess they can have that opinion, but if the Press Democrat is not going to be printing that COVID-19 is a hoax, or if they do, they're going to have somebody on the other side of that say, well, no, according to this and the facts, here you go. So it's a sticky, it is, therein lies the rub. We want consumers to be able to share information and feel empowered and not have gatekeepers like me, have institutional control over their thoughts and their actions. And that was the beef with, news industry for so long, is like, we were like this authoritative, monolithic kind of, the Press Democrat, the Washington Post, now I get a lot of my news from blogs and, other people. So I get it. But unless we're just going to all agree that facts don't matter anymore, and that people's lives, and the political, even just the political underpinnings of our democracy don't matter, then something has to be done, in my, humble opinion. And I think we're seeing that in the run up to this election.
Derek,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt here, but I know that time is going by really fast, and we have at least two more people who've had their hands up and would like to ask you.
Absolutely.
Do you mind that if we go ahead?
No, I'm sorry.
No, these are profoundly big and important questions. So, worthy of big discussions. But anyway, we have Linda Stamps and then Roger Lubeck, who've been waiting to ask you questions, and probably, I think we have time for at least those two. So Linda?
Yeah, thank you. Derek, would you care to comment on journalism standards in terms of students coming out of university majoring in journalism? Do you think there's been any dilution of those standards, and quality of journalistic reporting has suffered in the context of this sort of synthesis of news and entertainment?
Not in my experience. I mean, there's not as many journalism programs, obviously, as there once was. Like true, a lot of places don't even call it journalism. I earned a journalism degree. A lot of colleges don't even offer that. It's communications or something else. But to me, that's not terribly troubling. What I see in my world, we have a program actually in our union called Bay News Rising, where we take college students and we mentor them. And I am amazed at how much smarter and much more savvy in a lot of different ways they are than I was coming out of college. We were, I came out where you write the news story, you write the most important thing first, and then you go down that list. These are multimedia journalists and multimedia thinkers across many platforms. They can use video, they can use audio. They are versed in all the tools. The problem, as I see it, is that they lack opportunity to go out and make a career of it. And that gets back to the whole idea that we have fewer, places. The news media is shrinking. The actual news media is shrinking. And so, they come out of college, and like a lot of industries, it's certainly not exclusive to the news business. They don't know, they don't go. Then they go take a job waiting tables. I mean, there's not that pipeline. They've got the skill set. They need the experience, and we need to be able to give it to them. And I would love to have the equivalent of something like a a core, like where you can go and get this kind of work. So to your question, UC Berkeley, Graduate School of Journalism is as profoundly good as it always was in my estimation. And they're, Columbia School of Journalism. They've all pivoted and now they think of themselves not just as journalism, but more broadly multimedia, institutions. And so, no, I don't. No, the millennials are smart and they just need the job opportunities to fly, in my estimation.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Roger Lubeck, you've been waiting.
Thanks. Derek, great discussion. I grew up in a family that started in the news side and then went to the feature side of newspapers. So I have a lot of experience in that. And I am interested in whether that side of the business has suffered even worse, although your Sunday section is still a great section. But I want to follow up about the truth idea and facts. One of the things that seems to me is that we relied on newspapers and professors and teachers to give us facts, and we pretty much trusted them. But as we move from print journalism to television and radio, television particularly, it seems to me that what emerged was this idea of I'm going to cover a story and I'm going to tell you what 90% of the people believe is true, but then I'm also going to give equal voice to the 1% that are lunatics. And I'm going to present that to you, and then you can decide what's right. Now, that seems to me a uniquely more television style and idea. I mean, people call it fair and balanced, but it just seems to me that newspaper print journalists didn't do that kind of reporting. But now we see this, well, let me just share all the ideas and you decide.
Yeah, well, as you probably know, television, political advertising under regulatory control, you have to give equal airtime, to political parties. That's a built-in, that's a law, Twitter and, the others do not. Look, it's the press in this country from its inception has always been rightly subject to suspicion, for its veracity. We had the pamphleteers, back in the early days of the Republic. You had the Hearst run, corporation that was promoting, Spanish-American War. I mean, it's on and on and on. I mean, there's, history is replete with journalism and journalists being, having a bias. The Press Democrat, we always had to, when the Pearson family owned it, and it's before my time, I heard we always had to write like a front page story about the fair when the fair was happening. So talk about dangerous times, just think about all those stories about, sheep and corn dogs and all the rest. But I'm making light of a very serious subject. And that's all good and healthy is for that kind of challenge. But I guess just to wrap this up, I would come back to you that when we're in a place where we have to fight over basic truths and essential facts and incontrovertible facts, like, and if I look out right now, is the sky blue? Well, it certainly is. Well, if we have to get down to that level of argument, and then people take that information and then use it in a way that undermines basically the very fundamentals, we're in a very dangerous place, right? And you hear it a lot living in this country, because I lived in South Africa. Before I went, like, well, America, we have these standards, and it will never be, South Africa, or we'll never live under apartheid and misinformation. And I heard all the stories listening to my flatmates. One was Afrikaner, one was considered colored under their apartheid regime, one was black, and they would just sit and talk about how they were pitted against one another, largely with misinformation about the other. And yet here we were having a beer sitting around the table at our, in our dorm room. So I feel like the script is flipped to a certain degree in this country. And now we are just now experiencing what so many other places around the world are experiencing, which is just the people being manipulated to a degree where bad things are happening, violence, people getting sick. And I would just say that we all collectively need to do something about it. What that is, we can all disagree and agree, hopefully.
Can I just chime in real quick? Because I'm a former TV news reporter, news junkie. I've written for the Press Democrat as a freelancer, and I've also been in radio news. I was a KGO news reporter, and that was owned by Cumulus. So you can imagine what happened there. But our whole news department was decimated. They actually did away with the news. But I would like to get back to the point with this. I call it he said, she said, instead of checking the, going in deep and finding out what the facts are, and then instead of leaving it on the viewer to say, oh, okay, yeah, he said that, and they're not equally weighted. It's to me, what that is a sign of is that news departments have done away with their budgets. And so they're not having their investigative reporting anymore. They're having these pundits come on. They're a lot cheaper. They're easy. They're quick. They're efficient. They don't cost a lot of money. So you're just not seeing that kind of, investment in getting the facts, because it's more expensive to do it right.
And you just said it. That's an excellent point. It's really expensive to do investigative work. I'm going to use a big term because I'm just trying now to impress you guys and make up for all my other previous faux pas. But I think what you just described it's the term called false equivalency. It's giving, some sort of, weight that you characterize as being equal, or true compared to something else. Well, to get back, no, the sky is blue. I'm not going to then go and quote a bunch of experts to say that possibly it was gray or something like that. It's just this false sense of things. And, on my Dirty Dozen thing and on my email, my favorite quote of all time and kind of my true north for these kinds of conversations and in my work is, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the late senator from New York. You're entitled to your opinions, but you're not entitled to your facts. Okay. So you want to debate, you want to take a fact and debate it, great, but the fact is still a fact. But to your point, more specifically, Terry, is that when we don't have the bandwidth and the money to support true journalism, then yeah, it's sort of a dicey proposition. And then people will fill that void, and they are filling that void. What will come in is the ministers of untruth, and the next thing you know, it's like, what do you believe?
So I hate to interrupt, but Sean has indicated that, and I've sort of thought that myself, that we need to bring this to a close. But Derek, this has been an incredibly interesting and timely discussion, this conversation. I like the word conversation, the suggestibility for one thing. So thank you so much. So Sean, do you want to take this over? And
yeah, and I just, if everybody could unmute their mics just a brief moment, because one thing that's totally missing out of this platform is giving a guy who won a Pulitzer Prize for covering the story, give him a proper round of applause. I think he.
yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Honestly, I know there's more people that have questions, and we could probably sit here for 2 hours.
There are a lot more questions, actually.
I do want to let everybody know that we have decided to keep the meeting room open for half an hour after to hang out. And if you want to ask those questions directly of Derek after, if he wants to stick around, you're more than welcome to. If not, that's cool too.
No, I'm happy to stay on. So
thank you. So,
and thank you. I want to say thank you, everybody. Truly, thank you for tuning in. And I love talking to these writers groups. And again, thanks Kimberly for and making it happen. But if I see you on the 4th next talk, we're gonna have a serious intervention.
Oh, honey, there are people I've seen more than you. Okay. I mean, there are a couple of speakers. I am at every one of their talks. But the thing with me is that my memory loss is so bad at this point which is accurate, that
Oh, so you're saying you don't remember my other? Oh,
Exactly.
wait, can we just stop here? I was here
Exactly.
thinking you liked me, and okay, no, all right, yeah.
I'm gonna get you a groupie badge, Kimberly.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
So
But Eric gave his talk at Napa Valley, but it was different. So he didn't just repeat what he did last time. So it's not your memory. You touched on some things, but it wasn't a canned speech. So I have to give you kudos for that. You did a spectacular job, and thank you for stimulating the conversation.
Yeah, and that's, go ahead, Derek.
No, I just say I hope you all go now someplace that's like gardening or outdoors. Go get some vitamin D.
The fall tomatoes.
No.
But at this point, it's a super timely conversation, and I like the word conversation, and I want to be able to facilitate more of that moving forward, doing breakout rooms if we need to. But this portion of the meeting, the conversation turns back to our membership because there's a lot of different things going on. So we've got, if we go a little bit over, if everybody's cool with that, I'd like to go ahead and move through that. But Roger, do you want to give us a quick update from board announcements in terms of membership?
Yeah, the membership after our 3-month renewal drive, the membership now stands at 223 members. We've lost a handful of people, which we do every year, but we've also gained in that 223. We have 19 new members that have joined in the last 3 months.
Dozens of amazing.
I noticed there are a couple of people that are online today who are actually no longer members. So you may not realize that. And if you need to renew, technically we have to have you rejoin the club. Now, if you want to renew, there'll be an extra fee, but we can easily renew you without any other online registration if you just contact me through membership, because we're done reminding people about their membership. And so if you have any uncertainty, make sure you give me an email and just say, what's my status? And I'll help you in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Roger. And thank you for the follow through. I don't know, Judy did that and a whole lot of other stuff, and it's a lot of work that I don't have to do. So thanks for making it seamless. Are there any other board announcements that we need to make at this time, or should we go ahead and open it up for member announcements?
Reminder about poetry, Sean.
Is Jan here? Or no?
Fran or Les? I don't think so.
Okay. The poetry anthology, we've got a little over a month, or exactly a month left for the poetry anthology, which will wrap up on November 15th. All of the information for anything and everything you hear here is on the website. So just go to redwoodwriters.org. Anything about contests, upcoming speakers, anthologies, the whole like is there, and that will continue to be improved over time. In terms of membership, I'm going to lead off just briefly because is Robbie still here? Maybe she left. Okay. Are there any member announcements?
Well,
Share.
yeah. Hello, everyone.
Hi,
And Derek, that was a magnificent presentation. Thank you so much. And I have to say, I agree with everything you said. Thank you so much. You're like a voice crying in the wilderness, and I really appreciate it. So I'm the salon chair, as most of you know, and the Redwood Writers Salon has transitioned to the Zoom room, and it'll be next Saturday at 1 o'clock. Our reading list is already full. However, we always welcome listeners. So please come. We have, as you can tell from the readings today, we have really talented writers who read in the salon. So please join us and next Saturday, 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Cher. And I think, Roger, you had your hand up again too, yeah? Or was that from before?
So Sean, I was hoping to say something too.
Oh, go ahead, Marilyn.
Well, I just didn't want to have the meeting end without letting everyone know that on Sunday, November 8th, we're going to have another Pulitzer Prize winner, this time in poetry, with Forrest Gander, who will be speaking. And the title of that is Twice Alive, Lichen and Language. Very interesting title. He poses, do we live twice? In what sense can we merge with others? How might lichen expand our thinking about human intimacies? It's a poetry reading and conversation around the language of science and poetry in a time of ecological trauma. So I think this is going to be a really another wonderful presentation.
I agree.
Oh, it's on Sunday though, on a Sunday, November 8th at 1 p.m.
Great.
Yep. And the sign up will probably take place sometime next week. We got a couple little details to work out, but we will open up registration for that early because we're going to do some additional promotion.
Yep.
I think I have Kim McGrath who had her hand raised, and then Kimberly has also got her hand raised.
No, what about me? What about this one?
What? Go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm
You've got
sorry.
the mic.
Can you hear me? You can hear me? I'm sorry. I was just going to say something that it's very much a part of the conversation we've been having. But when we, I grew up in an age where they tried, it seemed at least that the news on TV, they tried to present it straightforward. There was Walter Cronkite at least, And now when we tune into the media news, we get channels that are presenting their own station's bias rather than actual news. So we get like one channel that's completely biased right, another channel completely biased left, and we don't really get, and I want to know where it came over. I mean, I don't like that this is happening, and I also don't understand how it came over to that the news announcers get to be such influential public spokespersons.
So can I do this? This is the member announcement time. Can you stick around and ask that question direct to Derek after?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine. Kim.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Kim McGrath, did you have a question or an announcement?
I had an announcement. I just wanted to say that finally my book is published. It's on Amazon. It should be up in the next couple of days. It's My Year on the Road. It's the story of our travels after the Tubbs fire, and then we've had many fires since then, and they're included in there as well. So thank you. My Year on the Road.
Congratulations. Make sure you hook up with Jean Sloan so that you can participate in the author lunch. And that is another announcement. And then I'm going to give it to you, Kimberly. The author launch is, we're going to move that. It's not going to happen in December. We are right now only going to do it in February. So more details to come on that. Kimberly, take it away.
Okay. So sorry, I was being asked a question too. No, I just wanted to remind everybody that, again, you can always tune into other branch meetings now that they're all on Zoom. And this Tuesday at the Central Coast branch, of which I'm a member, I'm going to be reading my story that was published in our last anthology, I always get it backwards, Sunset Sunrise. So the story that I had published in there, I'll be doing that. And I'm not sure if the meeting is open to the public, but if you just let them know that you're a CWC member, but you can go to the NorCal website and you can find the information for that branch and all the other branches. But it would be wonderful to see some familiar faces in there.
It's a great story. So make
did
sure
I say
listen.
Tuesday night? Sorry, did I say Tuesday night?
Yes.
Okay.
What time?
7.
And to what Kimberly's talking about too, we're going to continue to update the links on our website so that if you want to, if for whatever reason you have somebody who's a member in another club who, you want to, whatever the case, you can access speakers for different clubs, and the fee is the same as this. Most clubs have the same exact fee. So
yeah, the great thing about this is this one is totally free. It's totally
Nice.
free. So show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
you can spend the $5 on a Starbucks coffee and then go listen to Kim talk. So
Right.
There are some tremendous speakers at other clubs. They're different days, different times. You'll get to meet other members from around the state. So don't just, I mean, we all obviously have the most awesome club, but don't ignore that there are other folks out there. It's really great.
Yeah, and if I could just say too, real quick, next month at Napa, we do charge the $5, same as here, but our Linda Loveland Reed is our speaker in November. And so if you missed her talk last year, please hop on over because I'm excited to be hosting her over there. And it's November 11th, Wednesday evening. So you can find that information too on the same website. And so, yeah.
Well, this has been a phenomenal meeting. I'm going to flip both screens because we got 2 screens here. Is there anybody that has a member announcement that I missed? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Is that a waving a hand there, Dimitri, or are you just rocking your chair drinking? There you go. I got you. Everybody, I can't thank each and every one of you enough. You make my job easy, and I want to give additional kudos yet again to Marilyn, who has lined up speakers. We only have 3 open speaker slots for all of 2021. So there's a lot more great speakers to come. We are trying to bring folks in to speak on topics that we haven't had in a while. And this was a classic example of having Derek come in and talk about a very timely issue, albeit kind of borderlines on the political realm, but this is the world we live in right now. I'm in news media. I work with Derek and Chrissy at the Press Democrat. And, you know, there is hope. I'm at the IJ in the Bay Area News Group now, and I'll just share for those who worry about the falling out of local journalism. Our online subscriptions for the Marin IJ are up 420% year over year. So,
whoa,
yay,
420%. So the print
Whoa.
product is holding its own, but the online subscribers and our daily news digest, which is free, is now up to 32,000 people every single weekday are getting that news delivered to them. So there's hope. I can't speak highly enough about the topic that you did. It's incredibly important. And thank you all for being here. The meeting room's going to stay open for another half an hour if you want to chit chat amongst yourselves. If any of you want to have a more private conversation, reach out to Judy or and we can put you into a private, we can set up a separate room, but I'd rather not do that unless you actually request it. So thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
Sean.
great rest of your
Thank
day.
you. Yeah, I'm going to stay on just to talk to you for a minute, Derek. I'd like
That'd be
to.
great. Yeah, I'm good until about 2:45 or 2:50, and then I unfortunately have another 3
Mine will be
o'clock.
very quick.
No, you're fine. I'm just letting you know I have to, one of the other hats I wear, I'm president of my son's middle school parent faculty club. And
oh, that's a great role, important one.
well, it's been a week, but that's a subject for another day. When they surprise you on a 5 o'clock that they're going to want to shut the school down and talk about social media, we all had to.
Oh my gosh.
We all had to pile in, and we succeeded within a week of having the school board hit the pause button on the conversation. That speaks to the power of social media. But that's also, to get back to something I said earlier, I forgot my wife's 15th wedding anniversary, because on the same day we were doing a rally outside the district offices, and I was a little bit. Anyway, enough about me. Aren't you guys? I'm surprised there's enough. What's wrong with you people? You're here. I'm still talking and you're still listening. What's wrong? Okay, I'll shut up now.
I don't know. I was wondering if I might start because I need to vanish as well. Is that okay with everybody? But I'm actually asked, I have 2 questions that one of our younger members, Redwood Writers members, Jennifer Sawney, asked if I would ask these on her behalf because she's working today, can't be here. She's registered and is very disappointed she couldn't be here. So what I could do, in fact, if you prefer, I can send these to you on email if you don't mind, or if you would rather not, I can just ask them right now.
Why don't you send them to me via email, just so if others have, if
Yeah,
she's willing to take that on by
idea.
email, and you've got my ad, and anybody, it's really simple. Deadline Derek@gmail.com, and I would be happy to continue the conversation, there or another format. So that would be great.
Oh,
that's terrific. Thank you
I
so
screwed
much.
up.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
I managed to screw up. I did have your PDF. I don't know where I put it, but if you'd resend it to me, I sent you an email, send it to me, and then I can send it to the folks when I send out the replay.
And I just sent it back to you a
Oh,
few
thank
minutes
you
ago.
so much.
You should have it, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay,
Wonderful.
well, I'm going to say adios and thank you so much again, Derek.
Okay, my pleasure, Marilyn. Go have fun in Golden. Go drink some Coors Light.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Something
don't listen to the naysayers.
Okay, thanks very much.
So,
Oh,
right.
great.
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, Derek.
Sure.
I suffer from the same malady you do. I sometimes stay up late at night worrying about my own facts, as I happen to spend a lifetime in science. And science is all about knowledge. In fact, that's where the word derives its origin, I believe. And facts, probity, honesty, trying to get it right as best you can through a lot of very hard work. I just thought you might be interested. I know you know that in your line of work, but in the early October issue of Science Magazine, which is the most prestigious science magazine in the world, it comes out weekly, about 50 times a year. There's a little piece about a partisan divide. And it says, United States leads in science trust gulf. At the end of September, the Pew Research Center interviewed people on right and left-hand sides of the political spectrum. So they looked at 20 different countries and they asked people who are on the left or right versus the right, do you trust science a lot? And you can imagine what country trusts the divide is greatest. It's the United States. 62% on the left said they trust science a lot in this country. 20% of those on the right said they trust scientists a lot. And if you look at the global pandemic and the differences in the response to wearing masks, by example, or social distancing properly, you see it right there. I mean, there's no question that 1 out of 5 on the right actually trust scientists a lot. So they're not going to believe what we say.
Yeah,
And,
I think that
this has been a very disturbing thing for
yeah.
me because I happen to be among those people who work in the sciences. But I wonder if the Press Democrat has done pieces on this sort of thing and trying to decipher why it is that there's a threefold difference in this country if you happen to be a Democrat versus a Republican in terms of believing scientists.
I don't think the Press Democrat has, just because I don't know that that's its particular focus, but I know it's as you point out, it's a particular focus for, other publications. It reminds me, I think the New England Journal of Medicine, I think I'm saying that right, for the first time in its history is endorsed in the presidential election. And I think it's, related to this. And there's probably people, in their membership that are opposed to that because for the same reason, they don't want partisan politics to creep into, scientific inquiry or journals. But yeah, you're hitting on a point that it gets back to what we were talking about before, the whole issue of confirmation bias and also just the distrust. I think I would just end it with this by saying that it's not just journalism. We more broadly, according to the data, Americans distrust their institutions more than ever. And it's government, it's everything. We are living through a time where the populace really has a suspicion of anything that has a whiff of authority right now. And it's not a bad thing to have a skeptical view of things, but I think it's bad to be cynical about it. And I think we've crossed over into the cynicism realm where you is by default think that somebody's wrong.
You tune into what you want to hear, and that's what you hear, period. Just like on the news, the major news channels that report for the Democrats versus the Republicans. So
yeah.
If I could interject in this, a lot of it is cultural. The disbelief, what people consider fact, what people, I've been trying really hard the last couple of days I'm not one who gets super political, but my grandmother-in-law just passed away night before last. She's in the Midwest, and she was 99 years old. And she was very healthy right up until 10 days ago. And she got the virus. And she was only in the hospital for about 5 days. But, you know, people, the whole family, my husband's family encompasses half of this small town, is so upset at the loss of this woman. And, you know, I'm thinking 99 years, you get to that point, you go out alone in a hospital room, no family around you whatsoever, but you've got somebody dancing around, you know, look, I'm fine. It's cultural. They're going to have a funeral for her in a couple of days. And as devastated as everybody is, and you know, several members of the family have the virus, and we think that's how she got it. But they're going to, I guarantee they're going to show up to that funeral, and they're not going to be wearing masks. They're not going to be distant. They're going to be huggy, crying, you know, spilling all kinds of stuff from themselves all over each other. And I love my I love my in-laws, but it's cultural. And they, you know, there's a plausible denial that people have. I think that when the science and then the truth, because you can find statistics to fit any argument, you know, that's
Right.
a fact.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
think
so
Sean, if I could, I mean, I think Sean made a point earlier around this subject of, you know, where the conversation today kind of creeped into the political realm. And, you know, probably as writers, and I know as a journalist who considers himself proudly part of the mainstream media, you know, it becomes uncomfortable to talk about some of these things. And it is cultural, it is political, and it's creeping in ever more. But the real challenge here is, and it also gets back to the question of what do we do? What's our responsibility here? Not just, you know, as journalists and writers, but as citizens, to speak up for what we know to be the factual truth. And so it's causing all of us to self-reflect in this place and have these hard conversations, I think, and with our families, and in our communities. And it's again, it's just it's a place I never thought that we would be in this space and time, you know, especially in a pandemic. But this pandemic has really revealed the magnitude of the problem.
Yeah.
You know, Derek, you brought something up early on in your talk too, and kind of circle back to that of the media literacy and some of the different organizations that are out there. One of the perks that I get of working at the IJ is to get a few passes here and there for the Mill Valley Film Festival. And Chrissy and I watched this one that was on social media, touching on a lot of the stuff you talked about. It's called Trust Me, and it's a documentary, but it's folks that are talking exactly what you were about, teaching the middle schoolers and the high schoolers how to fact check, because the bullying, the cyberbullying, and all that stuff that's gone on is now transferred from beyond the middle school, you know, point in the figure level to where it's happening with, you know, my friends that I grew up with in high school who are divided on an issue. And it's like, it's so tough. But the point is, there's teachers that are out there saying and teaching and educating students in middle school and high school on how to fact check and how to do it properly, to where there's this concept of not vertical checking, it's horizontal. So as soon as a story gets posted, you're automatically checking the Google link to see who that organization is, who's sponsoring them. So you have this whole horizontal digest that has to happen before you validate, is this real or is it not? And, you know, I've been guilty of reposting stuff just because it aligns with my own confirmation bias, and it's also funny and silly and insightful. And when I do that, I'm part of the problem. And Chrissy very promptly points out to me and anybody else who does it that ain't too cool. So,
well, we're far afield. You're probably old enough to where, like I used to get the Encyclopedia Britannica, 26 volumes or whatever. There's 26 letters in the alphabet, right? So
I think they combined a couple of those last
they did. I
letters.
think it was 24 because they did X and Y.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah, we're a long ways afield of that. And also, this was also brought up in this piece in the Times today, which I encourage you to read about the Integrity Project. But part of the strategy here is just to overwhelm people into submitting with just the volume of information and contradictory facts to where they don't vote. They just give up. It's like just over just the volume. It's a fire hose of information. And that's a whole nother part of this problem. And with youth too, they're connected in so many different ways. So yes, it's literacy. It's also limiting, the technologies. But I agree with you, Sean, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's got to start. How can we not be teaching this? It's like financial literacy. We should do finances and media and some of the things we're just not even really hardly, touching upon. And I'm a high school, one of the hats I wear, I'm Napa High School's cross country coach. So I spend a lot of time around, young people, and they are really smart in a lot of ways. And they have got significant blind spots in others. They can kill you and regale you and impress you in certain ways with what they know, and then completely leave you dispirited and scared about things like this. They don't know, they don't appreciate it, and then they're just going to be manipulated when they get older. They're getting manipulated now.
When I was young, I was talking with my husband the other night. When I was because as an editor, I'm kind of a fact-checking. Well, I probably shouldn't say Nazi, but that's my specialty. And I've gotten to where I can call people out so fast. I can do it while they're reading their story to me. I can be looking it up and I'll find inaccuracies, but I was a horrible student. I was absolutely horrible. I only lasted 2 weeks in community college, but I from elementary and middle school on, I worked in the library at school. And so, I knew the card catalog by heart. I knew how to find information, and I knew how, and I only ever did that when it suited me, of course. But, we have so much information now, but I think what we're lacking is, I know when I read stories, it doesn't matter what genre, it doesn't matter. I know when somebody just lifted information, if it's a period piece, right off of a Wikipedia page, and we tend to revere Wiki as gold when it's actually not, we don't look at what sources, what I could tell you the level of every tabloid that there was out there, where they stood on the ladder, and same with the legit journalism. And 3 days ago, there's this New York Post article run, all over social media that everybody's all outraged about the Biden article. And, and I'm like, okay, but you guys, it's the New York Post. I mean, you got to look at your sources, and they don't. I mean, people were really indignant and offended that I was knocking on the Post. And I'm like, it's the New York Post, people. I mean, so I know that sounds snobbish, but, I feel like people don't, there's emotional thinking, but there is not enough critical thinking anymore.
True.
So,
I gotta go in a few minutes. Is there anybody here that hasn't, that has a question that hasn't been able to ask it, or you've hung in it for this long?
And you got to get going. It's 2:50, so you've got to.
Well, I'm happy to fudge it. It's just kids, and I mean,
it's just the future leaders of this country.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Is there anybody here that wants to? Just want to make sure.
I think you just did a spectacular job here, and I'm so glad that you're having this conversation. And the more places we can get people talking, the better.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I just would leave you with, again, what we've just been harping on is that it takes all of us, I think, collectively to really advocate for some fundamental changes that are going to help us, in media literacy, jobs, promoting, subscribing, local journalism, all of that. It's not a simple answer, but
No.
You know, I'm preaching to the choir with you guys. You guys are a literate group. You guys, you're readers. You're critical thinkers. The challenge is getting with people who don't see the value of that. You
Yeah.
know, they're not my, you know, my grandfather, you know, in Oklahoma, his brand of republicanism was George Will, and, you know, intellectual conservatism. And, you know, he would send me George Will's columns. And even if I didn't agree with the politics, the writing was just on a par that I will never reach, of course. But it's like a dumbing down of the electorate. And we could say that, you know, it's not part of, you know, we're writers, we're journalists, we're whatever. That's, you know, we're not. But the fact is, we're all engaged, whether we know it or not. We're all in a battle of ideas right now and manipulation. And so, even if you don't want to, you gotta jump in the fray. So,
Well, I wanted to thank you, Derek, and all the rest of you too, for allowing us. I'm with the Mount Diablo chapter, but I was delighted to find out about your presentation today. I learned a lot from it. And some good ideas have come out of it. We don't have time to delve into them anymore, but I wanted to say some of the last speakers talked about the children. I would think that, and I was of the slide rule era when I went to Cal as an undergraduate student. But now with the computers, I assume they're teaching really young kids computer science. And I think the ethics of computer science should be a good part of that classroom setting too. The things we spoke about today, what's truth, what are facts, and integrate that into some of the programs for younger people in elementary and middle schools and even in high schools, so that we deal more effectively with some of these issues, because quite frankly, it's been very confusing to a lot of us what's going on and getting at the bottom of it. But I think those would be some good ways to begin looking at this more closely.
you can take this as the gospel. The Bartender's Black Book is now in its 10th edition, and the martini is still a martini. So there you go. Okay,
All right. Well, thank you.
that's the last word. So thank you,
Okay.
seriously,
Thank you.
really appreciate it. All right,
Have a great
Thank
day.
you all.
all right, bye bye.
Okay.
All right,
I'm
take care.
gonna end us right now and
Hang,
thank you
hang
all
on,
for being here.
hang on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Hey, is it Robert? I'm sorry, from Mount Diablo?
Yeah,
Robert
Bob
Lane.
Lane.
Hi, as you may or may not know, I'm also part of Mount Diablo. And if you liked Derek, I'm always giving Jill suggestions.
I almost made it out alive.
You almost did. Yeah.
So you are going to have the
I'm
final
always
word.
giving Jill suggestions, and but it would be if you would like to see Derek over it, because I know he would change his talk a little bit to make it still interesting. And
Because you're gonna be there.
yeah, so
Oh my gosh.
if you think about it, hit Jill up and suggest
so
Derek
for-
as a speaker.
So for real, I would be more than happy to speak again and again and again, because I'm very, obviously, I care about this subject matter. And yes, I will change it up. I think there's a mountain in the Diablo area, right? You said the
Yeah.
So I'll talk about mountains and stuff. So
Yeah, okay. Well,
yeah.
you know, Derek, I belong to 7 branches and we're only through 3.
Oh gosh,
so-
look at the time. Oh boy, I
Okay.
gotta run.
I've got to run too, because I've
Think
got
of
to
the children.
Thank you all
Just
for being
hit me
here.
up, Kimberly.
Thank you all.
Okay, bye.
Awesome.
Have a
Take
great
care,
day,
y'all.
everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.